this whistleblower article about NPR being like, out of 87 editorial positions, 87 are held by Democrats, 0 by Republicans.
Super woke.
Big bias, super woke. I've been around here forever, and like it's changed, it's bad. And so they've appointed this new person, and Catherine Marr, who may well be an intelligence agent, because like if you look at her like
Her
CV and
is
background,
like loaded, yeah.
yeah, it's like Middle Eastern languages, like it's the classic.
The typical
CFR.
But so the thing that went viral is she gave some TEDx talk. I guess she gave a few variations on this talk, but like a few of them have gone viral. Mainly this TED Talk one, and it's very much a kind of standard philosophy of science, like Kuhnian type thing, where it's like I mean, she's very incoherent and inconsistent in what she says. Like she uses the term "the truth" a lot, but it's basically the truth changes. The truth isn't what science should be oriented towards anyway. It should be oriented
Or journalism. That was her.
Yeah.
Let's forget about the truth. That was like let's find common ground. I remember the one sentence like let's find places of common ground.
Yeah, she said
instead of looking for the truth.
Oh my God.
Yeah, she said that our concern for the truth sometimes can impede consensus building or something.
And we should go away from it's.
Is that true though?
Well, so
truth had its day. My understanding was that like the search for truth, that was a good idea.
But I wonder if that's true.
Huh?
Yeah.
I wonder if that's true.
Right. Yeah, it was. I mean, it's kind of interesting because I don't want to say too much, but a friend was like working on it in relation to media stuff. Y'all know him. But so he was asking for like advice and stuff, and
No, go ahead. Say what you want to say.
well, I saw the line because you brought up about consensus. She's like this, the truth can stop us from reaching consensus about things. And so I just sent my friend a quote from Foundations of Bioethics, Tris Engelhardt, my former mentor. A great quote, which unfortunately I don't have memorized, but about the way that consensus actually functions if you don't have foundational agreements about like basic principles. In other words, it's essentially just the imposition of views by force.
Yeah.
It's consensus in name alone. And but he puts it very pithily in this sentence from Foundations, and so I sent that to my friend, and I don't think he used it, but anyway, so Marr's point is like the relativity of truth. It's relative to a paradigm. Paradigms change, et cetera, et cetera. It's very much the kind of pragmatist line that like Putnam and Quine and others took in analytic philosophy. And
Well, the Putnam is he wavers back and forth. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's been a long time since I worked in this stuff, but I
took her as doing a kind of Kuhnian analysis.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but
I didn't.
Thomas Kuhn is clearly wrong. Clearly wrong. It's bullshit. Sorry, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. Because, for example, he says, if you are doing science in a paradigm, there are questions you cannot raise, there are views that you cannot hold, etc. And then he says, well, the paradigm of modern science is Descartes.
It's Descartes.
The mechanism of Descartes. Well, it turns out that action at a distance, which is the key concept of Newtonian mechanics, is not mechanistic. So
it's not mechanistic.
It's not mechanistic.
Why not?
Well, so the Cartesians always criticize Newton because they say that action at a distance, like Aristotelian properties, like tendencies. So they say you cannot hold down until you prove there is a mechanistic reduction of that property, gravity. And Newton's, that's when he say, I don't, how do you say that in English? Hypothesis non-fingo. Mm-hmm. However you say that in English. So he say, my experience leads me to this conclusion and to this law. I cannot give a metaphysical explanation of this law, but that's the law. You cannot deny the law because you have a metaphysical presupposition which is mechanism. So right there, Kuhn is destroyed. And then he says, if you do experiments in one paradigm, you cannot use that in the next paradigm. That's false, entirely false. Like Newton had done experiments about light with the corpuscular viewing mind. And he had not solved all the problems because light has properties that are wave properties. But Fresnel, later, 200 years later, 150 years later, something like that, took Newton's experiments, the results, interpreted them with the wave paradigm, and solved the problems. Right? So, and that's because you have an experience that grounds the explanations. It's completely false that the way in which you conceive the explanation determines the experience. That's completely false. I mean, it is true that it conditions to some extent, but for example, the astronomical charts. Oh my God, we have had those charts with all paradigms. And the condition for all paradigms is to say the phenomena, which are the same. The phenomena are the same. Then there are new phenomena that force you to change the paradigm. But when you change the paradigm, you have to save the phenomena that were in the previous one. Otherwise,
so it's not a complete rejection.
No,
it's drawing from the old paradigm to create a new paradigm, but it's not.
I don't like the word paradigm.
Yeah.
I don't like the word paradigm because many of these things. First of all, the axioms are constant. The axioms remain.
They
But
shift into the next.
But axioms are precisely what would change from paradigm to paradigm.
No, but that's not true. That's the thing.
What about Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry?
Well, if you see, so the guy who did the change is Riemann, and the first guy who had the idea was Gauss. Gauss is the first guy who had the idea, and his idea was, what if Gauss? Who's Gauss? Friedrich Gauss, one of the greatest mathematicians in history. This is from the 19th century. He said, what if I measure the inner angles of a triangle that is enormous and they don't add to 180 degrees? So he measured it with a big triangle. I think it was the moon, the top of a mountain, but it added to 180 degrees. He said, well, okay, so the space is straight. I was wrong. But then Riemann saw that and thought, what if we do it bigger? and then he found that it didn't add to 180 degrees. So he
because the curvature space-time only shows up in a enough scale.
But this, he didn't think of the curvature space-time.
Right.
So what he did was to formulate a non-Euclidean geometry. But the way he did it, that's amazing. The way he did it is very important because he followed posterior analytics again. So Euclid formulated his system with posterior analytics. Avicenna and Grosseteste used posterior analytics to find experimental science. Galileo used posterior analytics again. And Riemann used posterior analytics again. And then what Riemann says is...
what are the principles from posterior analytics?
In posterior analytics, Aristotle says that you have to reduce everything to axioms, definitions, and postulates.
But are there actual axioms and principles that were...
Yeah, so what Riemann says is... the relationships between solid bodies are the matter on which you do the constructive geometry, because geometry is constructed. But there is something previous to the construction, which is a reality that you experience. And then he says, well, those relationships between solid bodies can be analyzed in a Euclidean way, or they could be analyzed in a non-Euclidean way. And then he begins an analysis, but then in his analysis he presupposes most of Euclid's axioms. He just changes one or two, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's the method, right? That's how you generate new geometries is by varying one of the axioms.
Yeah, but what you see in Riemann and in Hilbert too, that Hilbert was very important in relativity. In both of them say there is a reality that we are analyzing. It's not I do whatever I want.
Sure, but that's their personal philosophical views.
No, Hilbert was a Kantian. He was forced to say that because of the matter, not because of his.
The underlying principle is that geometry or mathematics is or science is the analysis of the relationship between bodies.
Geometry, only geometry.
Geometry
only
is
geometry.
the analysis of the relationship between bodies.
Yeah, between the limits of bodies. That's the and in that. So about that there has been a discussion between Newton and Leibniz. And Leibniz was Aristotelian, and Newton, in this point, was not. In everything else, he was an Aristotelian. And that's why I can't say what he said, but it doesn't matter now. So in the end, both Hilbert and Riemann say Leibniz was right. Yeah. But my point is there is a reality that you are analyzing. It's not a genius has a view of a new paradigm and then everything is transformed. No, that's not true. That's not true. I mean,
well, Kuhn doesn't put it in terms of like some great historical genius either, right? He views it as a communal effort.
But there is like this Cartesian paradigm.
Yeah, it's funny you bring Kuhn. I've just been reading Kuhn again after many years. Yeah, so I mean, his idea seems to be that paradigms get replaced by the death of the people who hold the old paradigm, right? And so...
no, I think it's more about it's almost more about politics, right? It's about the shift from one paradigm to another really takes place through a bunch of and I haven't reread Kuhn. I'll tell you why he's
definitely got to do with the death of. I mean, there's political reasons as well.
Like death in a metaphorical sense, or just literally?
No, the physical death. Like the old people die off.
I mean, that's part of it.
And the new one instantiated. But I think it's
mainly about persuasion.
Yeah, but there's no ability to persuade.
But he doesn't mean politics in. I mean, you mean politics in science,
right? Yeah. I mean, all the stuff that goes on the ground, behind the scenes. The informal persuasion techniques and so on. All the
That's not possible for Kuhn, right? Because the two. If I'm in one paradigm and you're in another paradigm, I can't persuade.
Incommensurate. Yeah.
They're incommensurable because I can't persuade you that I'm right and you're wrong because we have different.
Yeah. I cannot understand what you're saying.
I can't understand.
And Fresnel translated Newton's experiments.
Right. However convincing my arguments are, they're only convincing in my paradigm, but they're not convincing in yours. I may be right that you're wrong in my paradigm, but I can't convey that to you.
Yeah.
Because in your paradigm, you're right and I'm wrong, and there's no conversation. It's like you're talking two totally different languages.
Right. Which is precisely the metaphor he goes to explain this incommensurability is translation.
Yeah.
So if I had known we were going to go into Kuhn like this, I would have actually refreshed myself on it. So and this would be an interesting topic.
I read him.
That does draw a number of current things together and connects to our kind of more general concern very.
I studied him 19 years ago, but I wrote a book. A chapter of a book on this. It's not.
I'd have to refresh.
And I found the mistakes. I mean the proofs that what he's saying is bullshit.
Well, what do you think about this? So. I'm using him actually the book I'm writing because people take him up to argue that comparative religion is impossible.
Yeah, that's what
you can't talk about because they're incommensurable. Hindus and Christians, Jews and Christians, they're different worlds. They have different systems of thought. If you're a Christian, what's convincing for you that's not going to tell anything to anybody outside that system, a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Jew, or a Christian. Even a Christian in another kind of denomination of that. That's because they have different terms. So there are people who've taken Kuhn's paradigm to say that the conversation between civilizations,
yeah, I find that absurd.
That's going nowhere. It's incommensurable.
Yeah. See, this is why I was saying is I need
What do
to
you guys
refresh
think about
myself.
that?
Well, because I know that maybe the single biggest criticism of that book, Structure of Scientific Revolutions, when it came out, was the kind of strength of the incommensurability thesis. And I think maybe he walked that back a bit.
A little bit, yeah. No, he corrected a little bit.
Yeah.
He has.
What did he correct? Yeah.
He has papers. I don't like he like. How do you say that in English? I forgot. I don't know. It's not that he backed. It's that he qualified. Yeah. He qualified, but I think it was insufficient.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know because I don't remember. This is what I'm saying.
I have his paper. I can send it to you.
I'd have to. Yeah.
Like
well, and it wouldn't take much. Like just to look at it's a short book. We could easily refresh for this.
No, the book, the later paper in which he responds to the critics.
I think some of that's included, at least in the version I have. But the point is, Kuhn, too specific, I'd have to refresh myself a bit. But I think there's clearly something to the idea that, and not to take it too far, but that, the conclusions you can possibly come to and the kinds of agreements you can possibly come to with other people does depend upon your having certain shared priors or prior fundamental beliefs or commitments.
Okay.
So take the religious example.
Okay. That's okay. Let's build from that.
I
not
agree to
an
that,
unreasonable thing to say, right?
But I will qualify in this way. I think there are natural first principles. And that's why you can translate.
What do you mean by natural?
One second. Yeah, I will go to that. But that's why you can translate from one language to another. It's not, they are not really, so people like Gadamer, he wanted to hold that translation is absolutely impossible. But then, the only example that he gave that was really effective was poetry. But poetry is untranslatable, not because meaning is untranslatable, because it is untranslatable because poetry relies on rhythm and not in meaning, you know what I mean? It relies in order, it's impossible.
Suggestions and...
No, and especially, so poetry wants to be beautiful in the way you say, and the way in which you say something is beautiful many times because of rhythm, sometimes because of rhyme, sometimes because of the connection of the words in a particular language. So really poetry is untranslatable. I agree, poetry is untranslatable.
Okay, you can give Gadamer that. Yeah.
I give that, but then, beyond that, I don't give him an inch. It's not.
This is something that also.
That's what you think Gadamer is doing. You think he's saying that translation's impossible?
Well, I will tell you. I think he was a sophist. There is a guy. Well, I will tell you why. There is a guy. There are many guys.
Is that your reading of Gadamer?
I don't know Gadamer enough to say it all, but I know Heidegger pretty well, and I think Heidegger's the main inspiration for a lot of this stuff. I don't know if Kuhn read him. I mean, Kuhn took a lot of his stuff from a guy named Ludwig Fleck, who wrote a book called, I think it's called The Genesis of a Scientific Fact, maybe, in like 1932 or something. But this is something I learned from my mentor, Tris, and like, Kuhn like stole a bunch of shit from this guy basically, and did not. And I think he maybe mentions him in one footnote, but like, if you know this stuff, you know that like, it's very derivative of Fleck, and he doesn't credit him, and it's a kind of ethically dubious thing. But and I don't know if Fleck was influenced by Heidegger. I haven't looked into that at all yet. But philosophically, I think I can argue for a good basis for a lot of this stuff in Heidegger, and I'll say that. An experience I've had recently with translation, which has been very thematic for me of late for independent reasons, because I've been looking at a lot of original text Heidegger stuff. I'm increasingly convinced that the way you're posing these things, it sounds like I probably agree more with Gadamer than with you. I think.
Let me tell you that Gadamer's. So what I had in mind, he had a paper called Histórica y Lenguaje. I don't know how you say that in English. Yeah. Language and historicity or something like that. And so he there confronts some criticism by Anglo-Saxon philosophers who say, well, if you state that no canon can be applied from one civilization to another, you are applying your statement to all civilizations. You know what I mean? You are stating,
It's an axiom. It's a
for all civilizations, which is contradictory.
It's a rule.
It's a universal rule applicable to all civilizations.
Right.
So they say you are contradictory, and then
it assumes that there are definable borders. Right?
What's the contradiction here?
You are applying. So he says it's impossible to apply a rule from one civilization to another. Well, that's a rule that he's applying to all civilizations.
Right.
So he says.
Wait, let's slow down and think about that.
One second. Let me give you the answer, because Gardner understood the objection and he considered it.
Okay.
Yeah. So he said, what happens is that this guy belongs to a nation of the Bay.
A nation of the Bay.
A nation of the Bay. The Anglo-Saxons are a nation of the Bay.
Yeah.
Who are subject to the principle of non-contradiction. But we Germans are not. We are beyond that. Well, when you hear that, you say, well,
Who said that?
Gadamer. That's why I say he's a sophist. No. It's a paper called Historia y Lenguaje in Spanish. I read it in Spanish. It was published by Gondran, the French.
So what's your point? That he doesn't even really, he's not consistent? Is that your point? That he's,
no, my point is that he's a sophist, because when you say
and what do you
that
mean by
you are,
sophist, that he's not
that
really...
you are, he's like Protagoras. When you say that you are above the principle of no contradiction, that's it. Yeah, there is no discussion. You can be
because
the greatest god, whatever. You know what I mean? You are whatever.
But hold on. Your original claim was that there was a contradiction between
saying there is no rule applicable to all
but that's not what he says, right?
That's what he says. I mean, I will show you the text. Okay. I will show you the text.
But I thought it was about intertranslatability, right?
Well,
you could claim that it is impossible for any meaningful proposition in one language to be translated without loss into another language. And that could be a statement about all languages.
No, but that's not what he's saying.
But that's not a violation of that statement, right?
No, because that's more particular.
Okay.
That's more particular. But I would say what? How did you say? Sorry.
Well, I thought the claim was something like incommensurability among languages, right? That means that I'm not going to be able to translate a claim that is meaningful within my language to me into your language in a way that's meaningful in the exact same way for you without any loss or any alteration of meaning, right? And I can make a claim like that about...
No, but the point, because if you can understand the same thing that I understand, so that I understood in Spanish the same thing that you are understanding in English, although I have to understand it in circumvent ways, let's say. Yeah, but if we can understand the same thing, which I think is obvious that we can, then Gadamer is lost.
You mean we have common access to some real thing?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. I can't speak to Gadamer here. I can only speak to Heidegger. I'd have to.
What's Heidegger's view on this?
Heidegger would agree with you here because he would
agree
say,
with what?
With Carlos.
Yeah.
Because,
agree with Carlos. Okay.
Yeah, because
so he would agree that when we translate from one language to another, we have some.
No, I say it differently. I say when I understand about a thing, something, I understand something about a thing. Say that I formulate that in different ways. He can understand the same thing, although he formulates in different ways.
Let's say I'm colorblind, he's not. We both look at the cup, we see it differently, but we're both looking at the same cup, right? We're both
but that's a different statement though, because colorblind well, not in civilizations, not everybody is colorblind. You know what I mean? It's like there
So
might
let's
be
pick a
But the point is,
Pick
like,
an example.
well, we can have different experiences of the same thing, but your point is that the thing is there, and our experiences
but
are both
when I
are-
say the thing, I don't mean only the physical thing. I mean its intelligibility.
Okay,
Okay.
Yeah.
sure, the cup as a cup, not just as a physical thing over here. But your point is, we're in contact with the same real thing, right?
And we can
we
understand
could
the same
describe
thing.
it differently, we could
Yeah.
perceive it
What
differently,
about
we
more
could feel
abstract
differently
things,
about it,
like-
but it's the same thing,
What
right?
about-
And the thing understood is the same.
What about a more abstract thing, like to say Bob is a good person? We're identifying a particular individual with some concept of goodness, and we're saying, hey, that person, he's good. That's a more abstract thing than saying the cup is on the table. Is
Yeah.
that translatable?
Yeah, what he would say, I
So-
think, is, well,
So
good
God was
person.
saying no, but you're saying yes.
I'm saying yes, but you could say, well, because in this community, what good person means is wider than what in that community, for example. You could say that. But I said there is a natural dimension to it.
Yeah, so
Okay,
let me
so-
get this thought about Heidegger, maybe this will help. The reason I think he'd agree with you is in Fundamental Concepts of Metaphysics, 1929 lecture course, which is where it's really the only place he talks at length about like animals and like animal life and so on. But his point is that like the beetle, I think he chooses the path of the example of the path of the beetle. The beetle has a beetle path, the lizard has a lizard path, right? Like they each only have their own kind of world. But for humans, we have access to the path, not the path as it is for
For Lisa, or
as it is for very differently for this other kind of animal.
And that's a universal, like humans,
Yeah, we have
whether you're
access
Chinese,
it's like
Indian,
things
African.
as things.
It's
So-
like Frege and Husserl were in that line. Like in geometry, we all understand the same thing, even if we express it with different words or whatever. You know what I mean? But I would like the discussion to be centered on Heidegger. That's one thing. Because it's why always Heidegger. There's so much stuff to talk about. I don't know.
I mean, and yet you want to center it on Heidegger, but I mean,
No.
I'm
I
not
didn't mention Heidegger. I mentioned Gadamer, and then you went to Heidegger.
But are you saying you want it to be centered on Heidegger, or you don't?
No, I don't.
Oh, I misheard. Did
I-
you
I-
mishear him too?
I
No.
thought he said I wanted to.
Yeah,
no,
he
no,
definitely
no.
said I want.
He
No,
did.
no.
It was a Freudian slip.
Yeah.
No.
You
So-
really do, Carlos.
I mean,
want
I
to-
was
think
a little
we
surprised.
can talk about Heidegger, but not always centered on Heidegger. You know what I mean? I want to
Yeah.
talk about the things, not about Heidegger.
Right.
Sure, but
All
but
right.
some of the things we're talking about, I think you sort of have to involve Heidegger. Like we're talking
I
about
don't-
Gadamer, for example,
No,
on this particular topic. You know,
Yeah.
I think the philosophical roots are there in Heidegger, and you could say the same thing about Kuhn. Really, I don't know if there's an empirical line there.
No, but Gadamer, the particular thing is that he says that thing, there is no rule applicable to all civilizations. He realizes that that's contradictory, and then he says, I am above contradiction.
Well, let me throw out another guy, Max Mueller.
No, I don't know Max Muller, I don't know.
Okay.
No,
So-
but I wanted to talk about traditions and stuff.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, we're kind of getting there, right? No?
Yeah, we are.
A little bit.
I mean, Mueller he was like with the first. He was a German linguist, 19th century, late 19th century. The first guy to really study Indian, Chinese thought, German thought. He translated from German to English, Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. But the way he dealt with this problem of incommensurability, he seemed to be kind of cognizant of it. So he was reading Chinese, Indian, African, all kinds of different philosophies alongside sort of classical European philosophical and theological stuff. And so he said, well, they're not, he didn't use this word incommensurability, but he thought that we can talk, I can pick up, he thought, I can pick up the Rig Veda, this ancient Indo-European text. I can read it. I can read Homer. I can pick it up and read it. Why? His answer was, well, because there's some kind of common psyche. There's a psychology that's the same. we share a human experience. Whether you're born in India, China, whether you're born yesterday or 5,000 years ago, there's something common in our human experience. And so, yes, we frame things in different languages, we have different conceptual frameworks, different paradigms, but underlying that is the human psychology, the human spirit that's appropriating and assimilating all of this.
I agree with that. And
Yeah.
not only that, but the being of things is common too.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
So there is a two
Yes.
poles. Yeah, it's the being of things.
right. The cup is the same whether you're Chinese or Indian or
Yeah.
you lived 5,000 years ago or you live today. And whether
So-
you call it a cup or whatever, it's...
Well, the same
Yeah.
in what sense? I mean, there will be differences.
Well, that's the point. Yeah, but
There will be fundamental
that's the-
similarities rooted in commonality of physiology.
But that's the essence of things. That's the thing. That's the essence of things. Like dogs are dogs then and now. The how do you say that? The kinds of dogs in English. How do you say that?
Species.
No, the
Breeds.
species is the same.
Breeds.
The breeds
Yeah.
are very different. But the species is the same.
But dogs evolved out of wolves through domestication by humans, right?
Not only wolves though. No, dogs. But dogs are.
But it's not like the species is eternal, like on Aristotle's view, right?
Well, really, I don't think they are eternal. I don't think neo-Darwinians are right either. I think they are entirely wrong, but that's a different matter. It's irrelevant. What matters is the same species. It's the same species. That's one thing that the paleontologists, if you want to talk about that, agree on. That one of the problems of neo-Darwinism is that dogs are the same species despite the intense artificial selection. They have been submitted for thousands of years, and they are the same species.
Yeah.
And so our experience of them is fundamentally the same. You know what I mean? And then the intellect, we are not a different species either. We are the same
I
species.
don't know about that though, but look, in the United States, when someone looks at a dog, they might see it as a pet, they might see it as a stray dog or a danger, etc. You know what they're not going to see it as? A potential food source.
Or
There
a
are-
threat. Or a
yeah,
threat,
but-
or a
But there are
threat.
certainly,
Yeah.
well, it could be a threat, maybe, wild dog or something,
Right.
but like, unless you're,
Yeah, well, that's a Heideggerian
really
observation.
statistically marginal in the United States, like you're starving and like, there's almost no situation in which someone in the United States is going to look at a dog as an object of food.
Yeah, well, that's,
Whereas that will be a default way of looking at a
yeah,
dog
but
in other parts of
that's the
world, other
use that you do of that species.
Yeah.
That's the use that you do of it. But there is something before the use. That's the
Okay,
point.
but the question is, what is the thing, right? What is it? What is its essence?
Well, it's hard to define.
Yeah,
it's hard
but
to
for
define.
one, it's
But-
a food source. For the
No,
other, it's not.
no. But what makes it really, if you want it like scientifically, the reason why it's the same species because they can have the same.
They can
They can
reproduce.
interbreed,
Yeah.
and it can be not sterile like the mule.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing, and so you have.
But that's not the primordial thing you're talking about that underlies all the different.
No, but that's the
That's a particular Western historical.
no, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's real. That's real. That's how you distinguish. That's how you distinguish that you are experiencing.
So, but then you must think that all scientists across all eras of history and in all cultures have the same fundamental experience of being.
when I say 2 + 2 is 4, according to your view, that's not true for the Yanomamis because they had no arithmetic.
Sorry, it's not true for who?
For a tribe of Indians in Venezuela because they had no arithmetic. That's wrong. That's Heideggerian. It has nothing to do with. So there are things of which we have experience and we don't express scientifically, but they are real. And then there are things that science discovers, like what is it that makes a species to be a species that other people don't know, haven't formulated scientifically, but they are also aware of it because they make breeds of dogs, for example. They make breeds of dogs, and they know they cannot breed a dog with a cat.
So
They can,
let's go back to your two
Yeah.
plus 2 equals 4 example, because the words you used were true for them. You said 2 plus 2 equals 4 would be true for these people, even if they had no arithmetic, right?
yeah, it's because it's not true for
Yeah.
a people. It's true or it's not true.
So
And
they
the-
would not be formulated in
But the-
terms of abstract numbers, but they would have some underlying understanding. You got two things, you
Yeah.
add them together, you got 4.
But hold on,
So-
what work is the word for doing here then? Because the way
No,
you're
no.
talking
If I
about
say
it,
I am
hold
saying
on, hold on. The way you're talking about it, for them, every truth that is true must be true for them, even if
No.
they don't know it, etc.,
no.
etc.
What happens is that things are not true for them or for not them. You know what I mean? It's that what happens is that there is an underlying reality that some people can formulate, some people cannot formulate, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist for them. I am criticizing that for somebody. You know what I mean? So the
Do you admit any for somebody? I mean, is there any
no,
sense,
yeah, there are things that are for somebody.
is there
like-
any sense in which the phenomena, which is some way I'm not going to put this in Kant's terms here, but the phenomena that we experience, is there any sense in which it is shaped so strongly by our culture, our location and time and being, that it really is just something, the phenomenon is just something different than somebody who's outside or different from that?
It could, there can be,
Yeah.
but so before we go to that difficult question,
Yeah.
I have to distinguish between theory and practice. Like, for example, clearly for me, drinking, 3 glasses of beer is not against moderation. For my daughter, it would be against moderation. So, or for example, another
Okay.
example, if I go on the street
Right.
and I see which is a thing that happened to me. I saw a woman run over by a car, and I wanted to help her. I had a truck, let's say. It's not I had a van. Okay, I wanted to help her. I came out to help her, but then I saw that she had her spine compromised, right? So I thought, well, there were no cell phones. It was 1985, something like that. 1986. So I thought I had to look for a telephone to help this woman. So I went to look for a telephone, right? Okay, if I had been a doctor, the right action would have been to pick her up, place her in my van and bring her to a hospital. So for me, the right action was to look for help. For a doctor, the right action was helping her.
To treat her directly, yeah.
Yeah, so
But your point is that this doesn't impact the ontology of the thing
no,
itself in
no,
question.
no. My point is that there is a fundamental distinction between praxis and theory, which is not very clear
Theory,
in
do you mean
Heidegger.
like ontology,
I
the
don't
way
think that's
things
a
are?
tenable
or-
distinction.
Yeah.
Well, I think it is.
By theory, you mean something about the way things are, whereas practice is how you
Yeah, it's not only that.
interact with how
Like
things
you can see, for example, you can see a person and say, wow, the soul of that person is beautiful, and that's just admiration for the beauty of a soul, right? Or you can see, well, that situation is pitiful. That's another. Or you could see, well, I must do this for this person. I must help that other person. Like Mother Teresa, I should give an arm to her. That's different from just saying, oh, Mother Teresa is admirable.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Let me give an
Yeah.
example, a classic Heideggerian example of how the ontology of things depends upon what he would call Dasein. And it has to do with the ambiguity of meaning that can only be resolved when you factor in the projects that the Dasein is about.
One second, one parenthesis. Doesn't that clash with what you say about the distinction between animals and human beings regarding the path?
How? Or
Because you say animals see the path as their particular path,
animals don't see anything as anything at all.
while human beings see the path as path.
We see the path. The animal, the beetle experiences a beetle path, the lizard experiences a lizard path. It's the same path, but this is true incommensurability. The lizard world is nothing like the beetle world.
Yeah, because it depends on the subject experiencing it, in the case of the animals. While in the case of man, you can perceive the essence of the thing.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But here's the classic Heideggerian example. Let's say I'm in my workshop and I'm using a hammer and some nails and some boards and stuff, and I'm putting something together, and the question is, what is the thing that I'm putting together?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Is it a birdhouse or a modern art project, let's say? If it's a birdhouse, maybe it's a really bad birdhouse, right? Because it doesn't work very well, it kind of looks like crap, it's odd angles, it's not what you expect, it's not very functional. So so on the one hand, it could be a failed or just a very poor birdhouse. If that's what I'm trying to build, if I'm trying to be a carpenter and I'm trying to build a functional birdhouse, then this is a failed birdhouse. It's a poor birdhouse. That's what it is, most essentially, right?
Yes.
But if I'm a modern artist, on the other hand, then all of this, the object and my activities, have a completely different meaning. In fact, this is a very good modern art project. It's a shit birdhouse.
Yeah, well, it's a trick there.
What's the trick?
There is a trick. Because he's talking about an artifact. Of course, regarding artifacts, everything depends on the...
Okay.
Okay, here's a stone lying on the ground. Is it is it a hammer? Is it a...
First of all, I have to know it. What? What was that? The dog,
it's just
right?
a bird at the window, I think.
Ah, yeah.
Or maybe quarter? Am I the only one hearing this?
I think it was the dog.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, that's the point. That's why Rosales criticized of Heidegger, that in the end everything was at hand. That's wrong.
So you're willing to admit, in the case of an artifact like a cup or this piece of art right here, that there is a certain degree, there's a high degree of subjectivity. Like what? It could be a birdhouse, or it could be a failed birdhouse, or it could be a successful work of art.
Because in the artifact, the measure is the project of the agent. But in moral action, it is not. In moral action, it is not. If I am an excellent
Are you
doctor,
saying moral action?
in moral action, it is not. If I am an excellent doctor, and
let's step back. Like, how do you distinguish an artifact from a non-artifact? For example, we were in the woods before we were talking here. We were out in the woods, and you might say, well, that's nature. It's not artifactual, but in some sense, it really is, because all the trees and plants, it's like it's wild and it's natural, but it's also very designed. Like, very few of those trees are native, quote unquote, native to Florida.
That's a hard question, but let me give you an example of morality, because I think so. Say I am an excellent doctor. I suppose that I am angry with Alan because he always talks about higher. No, I'm not.
That's a legitimate.
I know.
I know you're not,
but suppose then that he comes to my
office hours.
Yeah, to my office. Well, how do you call an office of a doctor, of a medical doctor, a clinic? Okay, he comes to my clinic, and I know he has an appendicitis, right? Or, well, no, that is let me give a bad example, right? Okay, you know he's
I was liking this one because you said the excellent doctor, and that would be precisely...
Suppose I'm an excellent doctor, and then I take...
But what is an excellent doctor?
No, 1 second. And then I take his appendix, but I add a substance that is going to cause, that's the dog, it's going to cause a heart attack that cannot be traced, the substance cannot be traced. Mm-hmm. So I keep...
CIA heart attack gun.
Yeah, they have a heart, oh my God.
Oh no, they had that like in the 60s.
Yeah.
So who knows what they have now?
Yeah, well, yeah. So I kill him, and then according to my project, that's excellent. Mm-hmm. That's excellent.
Yeah.
But
here's an even better example.
Yeah,
you're a lawyer.
But in truth, it's murder. That doesn't depend on my project. You know what I mean? That's natural. In truth, I am killing you. No, 1 second. So there, it doesn't depend. Yeah, you have.
Yeah.
It doesn't depend on my view. It is murder. And that's why
I think it precisely does.
Morality is the only thing that.
No.
doesn't-
I'm
Okay,
saying that
all right.
the difference between morality and technology is that in morality there is a measure that doesn't depend on me.
I don't think.
It doesn't depend on me
But
entirely.
any measure, any possible normative standard you could think of that you think is objective and that should apply to you, regardless of your particular views,
Morality is not objective.
it's
Moral-
not objective.
Morality is not objective.
Let's hear how Heidegger weighs in on this. How does he? To what extent is the way that I perceive reality, whether it's theory like ontology, the nature of things, or morality, to what extent is that constructed by
Yeah,
the subjective factors of culture, or however we want to call it?
It's always ultimately dependent on your self-understanding. And the example of the excellent doctor is a great example of this, right? Or let's take my preferred example,
Ex lawyer.
the lawyer, right? So one lawyer thinks that what it means to be a good lawyer is to, bill as many hours as you can, bilk your clients, make as much money as possible for the firm, etc. That's something lawyers very typically do. It's a very standard normative practice. Another lawyer thinks that what it means to be a good lawyer is to be, to bill fair hours, honest hours, not to overbill, even though it's a widespread practice among lawyers, but rather they have different ideas of what the good lawyer is, right? And what they do will be governed by that understanding of what a lawyer should be. Why? Because they're trying to be a lawyer, right? So I'm trying to be a lawyer. This is my understanding of what a good lawyer is. And so I'll act accordingly. If you have a different understanding of what a good lawyer is, you'll act differently.
Okay, I like the example. You know why? Because then I tell you, can you know that one of the two conceptions is morally wrong? Or
Is-
not?
is what?
Or morally wrong, or it's all relative?
Are you asking
I
like,
ask-
me
I am asking
personally,
you,
or,
there's a-
or
you-
what I can like
No.
demonstrate through philosophical
You
argument?
personally
Yeah, I think that overbilling the hours is wrong.
is wrong.
And there's various reasons for that. Part of
Yeah.
it has to do with my
So-
father who raised me had a very strong Protestant.
No, I think that thank God
home.
you have a perception of reality that goes beyond what you can articulate philosophically. Thank God,
That's
because
surely true.
otherwise
Surely
you
true.
because otherwise you could be a bad person.
Yeah,
So that's the point. That there is a
but no, the real point is even if there is a truth of the matter, something can only be normative for me if I accept its normativity. So
No.
it could be true.
no. Like Hitler maybe didn't accept that killing Jews was bad, and it's bad. You know what I mean? There is some normativity that is beyond what I understand about my explicitly about my because
But it clearly carried no motivational force for it. Precisely because it was beyond.
that's irrelevant. But that's irrelevant in this point. But moreover, I hold that in truth there is a fundamental perception of the good that made a crime what he did, even if he
A crime is a legal category. Let's say
more
immoral.
morally,
Yeah.
a crime, what
Maybe.
he did, I mean, in the moral sense,
Mhm.
what he did, even if he, moreover, after the Second World War, many criminals were brought to trial for actions that they did in accordance with Nazi ideology and the positive norms of the Nazi regime, and they were condemned, some to death. And I think many of those trials, not all by the way, were just.
Okay.
And that's because there is a perception, a fundamental perception of the good that every human being has, even if the strength of the ideology is such that is blinded to some extent for a while. You know what I mean? That's the
Maybe the best way to put this would be like to make this political and to say like, okay, these are your philosophical views. You think there's a single truth and a reality that holds regardless of whether people recognize it and regardless of whether it affects their behavior. But that's just your view.
No. Well, that's the postmodern way to say, and that
It's not even postmodern. It's just political.
It's not just
Well, it
political.
goes way back, right? I mean, this relativistic perspective on things.
No, but
goes-
But I mean, imagine
not
if
so
we were
radical.
like- imagine
that
if we were-
radicality is new.
But imagine
Yeah.
if this was like a legislative debate, right? And we're trying to pass law, and you're trying to invoke arguments like this, and I'm saying, well, I don't buy it.
No, like legislative debate like what?
Like whatever you want to, you want to pass a law. On
No, the
X.
point is, can you hold? And I will give you an example afterward. Can you hold that genocide is wrong, point blank?
That who?
Genocide.
Oh.
Or not? If you say no, you are too deep into Heideggerian thought, which I didn't think. Because
I can easily imagine
yeah.
situations where genocide would be legitimate. Sure, I can imagine
But
sci-fi scenarios where there's a hostile alien race.
that wouldn't be genocide.
If you wipe out the entire species, that's
No,
genocide.
if it's a defensive, that's not genocide. Genocide is murder, mass murder. Murder is not murder if it's
Okay.
legitimate.
Well, if you're, but then you're loading the morality into the term, and so of course I agree. That's like saying murder is immoral killing.
but-
so of course I think
No,
murder
but-
is
no.
immoral. It's
Yeah.
built into the definition.
But you are avoiding the question because legitimate self-defense is what you were bringing. I say no, it's not legitimate self-defense. You are mass killing innocent people directly. Let's
Okay.
say like that.
Right.
And now you said innocent people, so
Right.
yeah, you're essentially saying you're immorally killing people. And I
No,
would
no,
have
no,
to
no.
say
No.
He's framing a
No.
question in a precise way.
Yeah.
He's defining what genocide is to distinguish it from the
Legitimate
mass,
self-defense.
the mass killing of people in the effort of a self-defense.
Yeah, or
Self-campaign.
even mass killing of people as a punishment. Because in the Old Testament, God commanded
So-
mass killing of people as a punishment.
Okay, so I don't think I knew what you meant by
So
genocide.
genocide, you're meaning something like
Mass murder,
one powerful group just decides another group of people without any rationale, we're just going to destroy them, even if those people have never attacked you,
Exactly.
they've never
like the
encroached on
Armenian
your
genocide,
property,
like the Jewish
they don't-
genocide,
right.
Okay.
like the
I
Polish
think
elite
my point.
genocide.
I think my point here was
No.
correct. This is like saying, is torturing an
No.
innocent? Let me finish. It's like saying, is torturing an innocent person without any possible benefit from it? Is that immoral? Yes, of course.
Okay.
Obviously, it is.
The thing is that
So then he's admitting to what you're saying.
yeah. So that you can say that you can say that it's a reality, a moral reality, that doesn't depend on the perspective. That's the thing.
Right. It's
Uh,
as soon as you admit that torturing innocent people or genocide as we've defined it is wrong, you have immediately bought into an objectivist kind of perspective.
Not objectivist, because
or a theory-
realist.
A realist. Okay,
I
fine.
reject objectivist because in morality the subject is always implied.
I think objectivist and realist mean the same, but okay, but a realist theory of morality.
Is that all you're saying? Is that when we make moral statements,
There
people
are-
think that they are
No,
making
not
statements
people.
about reality?
Not people think. No, I'm not saying people think anything. I'm saying that there is a moral reality that holds even if people think otherwise. That's the point.
Okay, holds in what sense? In terms of validity?
No, in terms of reality, it's real.
I think you mean validity.
No,
It's true.
No, it's real. It's real. So genocide is a crime. It's unjust. It's whatever, immoral. Even if the person committing it thinks it is not.
So in a scenario, genocide's wrong, even if every single human being on the planet believes thinks it's right.
Yeah.
The torture of innocent people is wrong, even if there's 6 billion people on the planet. And
Who
every,
vote? Let's
and every
approve
single one
this. Yeah.
says it's okay.
Yeah.
It's good. Let's
Yeah.
say. So, but irrespective of what human beings think or don't think, there are truths that are real and true about moral facts. There are moral facts. Or
I
there
don't
are
like to
moral-
call them facts.
Or they're
because
moral-
realities.
They're moral realities
Yeah.
that are beyond. They're true today, and they were true 6 billion years ago,
Yeah.
and they'll be true 6 billion years from
Yeah.
now, even if nobody believes them or everybody believes
Yeah.
them.
I think
And the
so.
only way they can influence human moral behavior is through the mediation of human agency.
Yeah, but for example, Plato lived in a culture.
But that doesn't undermine
Yeah,
what you're
exactly.
saying. I mean, you can
Yeah.
still say like, well, that the way that
We
truth
might
is
be all
that
wrong.
realistic is appropriated is
By understanding.
subject to the understanding of the individual,
Yeah.
but it's still a truth that is appropriated by an individual
Yeah.
of some type.
Yeah, that's what I meant with the arithmetic example. So Plato lived in a society where homosexuality was widespread, and everybody thought it was right.
Yeah.
And he never accepted it exactly as people
And
say.
child molestation too, it seems.
Yeah, but and I will tell you something about that.
Yeah.
But when he wrote the laws, he finally realized this is wrong. This is wrong because there is a connection between sexuality and procreation. And in the text where he says it's wrong, he says a man shouldn't lie down with a man. Never you should kill the result of human generation. You should abstain from a woman if you don't want to procreate. And you should not masturbate. So you shouldn't saw on rocks and stones and whatever. And he was in a society that held the opposite, you know what I mean? But he realized, we are wrong. We are wrong. And Aristotle in the Nicomachean Ethics has a great passage in the 8th book, I think, where he says that most homosexuals, he thinks that homosexuality is against nature because he's a disciple of Plato. But he says most homosexuals are they have this unnatural tendency because they have been abused when they were boys. He says that in 8th book of the Nicomachean Ethics. Or 9th book, I don't remember which one of the two. But I mean, in a society where it was everybody believed it was right, they realized, no, this is wrong.
So your point is that the human intellect, through the use of reason, can transcend its cultural conditioning.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see the incompatibility with Heidegger here. My point was just the truth can be whatever it is, but the only way it can influence my behavior is if I take it as the truth. If I take it as normative.
No, it's not true. It can influence your behavior in a different way. For example, Marx and Ernst Bloch, they rejected God. They both knew that God exists, I think. And in the case of Marx, I can prove it. They knew he exists. They denied that he exists. So they didn't want to have him as a rule of action. Mm-hmm. But that determined their whole lives. Because the essence of their lives is despair.
Okay.
So because they knew, Marx clearly knew, Bloch is a different, Marx clearly knew that he was fighting with God. You know what I mean? He knew that if you read Ulanem, you see his whole motivation, according to Ulanem, is he wants to take revenge from God. Mm-hmm. Because he knows he is condemned. So the rejection of the truth leads him to a kind of life against the truth. That's you know what I mean? It's not, you might know it in the bottom of your being, like in wisdom, in the book of wisdom. I don't know if you remember that passage. I find it great. I think it's the 2nd chapter. I don't remember what the chapter, but it says, let's kill the just man because he reminds us our bad.
Sure.
Yeah, our bad education. They say, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but I mean, this comes back to you saying, well, they say they don't believe X, but deep down they really do know. But this is speculation on your part.
No, because otherwise they wouldn't want to kill the guy.
Okay, but this is like this is like speculation about their psychology, right? The real point is much more, I think, basic. And we can go back to religions, right? Like, it just has to do with fundamental normative priors and the things that you can possibly argue to from them. So, if you're an atheist, you simply will not be able to make the same kinds of arguments that a theist will be able to. And the arguments that the theist makes will have no purchase on you, right? Because you don't share the same fundamental
I'm not sure about the
presuppositions.
second thing. For example, Anthony Flew was an atheist all his life. And then, in 2001, when he was like 70 years old, he realized he was wrong, hearing the arguments of the theists. And he said, "Look, I didn't convert, I just realized I was wrong and these arguments were right."
But so what? A Muslim tells me you shouldn't eat this meat because it wasn't prepared this way, and Allah said you shouldn't do that. And I say I don't believe in Allah, and I don't believe in this tradition.
But
it
in
doesn't
that
have any purchase on it.
but in that case,
It would be very persuasive to a fellow Muslim because they'd have the shared premises.
Yeah,
but I don't share those premises,
well,
so it has no
Aquinas,
purchase on it.
Aquinas says that. So when you discuss, of course, so you want to talk. You want to talk. Sorry.
No, it's where I guess where is Heidegger at on this issue of, to what extent are there real moral truths, even if they are appropriated and assimilated by the individual?
Well, look, I'll admit Heidegger is not great on morality. That's a kind of tougher conversation.
Okay.
But Heidegger thinks that we are, he thinks that when you look at the cup, you see the cup. You don't see a mental representation of the cup that intervenes between the thing and itself. You have access to the cup. I also have access to the cup. These will be different, but it's the same thing. It's not like I'm looking at object within my paradigm, you're looking at object within your paradigm, and they're not the same thing, they're different things. They are the same thing, we're looking at them differently. He does have that. I don't know, maybe the easier conversation would have been tradition. I had prepared
tradition. I was thinking about tradition.
tradition. Here's the quick Heidegger on that.
Yeah.
Humans are temporal, we have temporality, and we have intersubjectivity.
But tradition's at the root, because tradition is that it is the subjective portion.
It's very connected.
Of our experience.
I wouldn't call it subjective, I'd call it intersubjective. Right,
intersubjective. Right, it's the intersubjective.
And I think it's more than that. It's more than intersubjective because
it's a shared cultural, linguistic
experience of reality, of the order of reality, including ourselves. Because
well, the things that do provide a basis for commonality or whatever, universality that you're trying to get at. I think one, like you say, reality. Period. Just reality itself. We all, and Heidegger would agree here, we all live in the world. Yes, there's a plurality of worlds. There's the world of the carpenter's workshop.
The Das Dein und Sieg. Right? I mean, I keep thinking. Let's put it in Kant's terms here for a sec. There's got to be something. We agree. There's got to be something out there that is what it is. That is the kind of the substance or the matter that generates some kind of
if we put it in Kantian terms, I don't...
No, I agree. For various reasons, I think maybe let's throw Kant aside for now. Also because it's complicated phenomenologically. But Heidegger would say, when he says being in the world, this is what all human beings at an essential level are. We're Dasein, we're being in the world. The world, it is the one world, right? It's the world. We're all in the world, the same world. The common world. I mean, that's its meaning, is that it's shared. Similarly for world time.
Yeah, but what I would say beyond that, I think, is that it's not the world, it's being. And being transcends the world. That's
right.
I mean
right,
God,
the world is within being.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, but it doesn't exhaust being. Being is something.
I mean being
more.
there in the classical way, not like Heideggerian way, in the classical way.
Well, and that's a whole issue.
Yeah, I know.
That's
why.
The entire phenomenological idiom presupposes this this adoption of the phenomenological attitude, which makes it impossible to simply and straightforwardly like compare views between the pre-phenomenological and the phenomenological, the way you can do between like different classical metaphysical positions, right? So you can compare like determinism, compatibilism, like these are all operating within the same kind of language at the same level of reflection. Phenomenology requires a kind of transcendence of that level of reflection.
Yeah, what happens is that, well, as you saw in that paper on Edelstein, I don't think, I wrote a paper on Edelstein last year, and then I showed there that she realized that Husserl had done that and he didn't need to do that, and that was a choice, and that choice put him in a different world, but that she thinks that's a mistake, that's wrong. And the point that she identified is that when you see, for example, glass, let's say dog, yeah, it's better. So you are grasping an essence that is real, and that essence is as it is in the intellect, it is universal, right? But if you are seeing a particular dog, you know that essence you understood from this particular dog or that or whatever. Yeah. So she says Husserl knew that they were identical. The essence that is in the dog, the essence that is abstracted, and he chose to consider it just as abstracted, and then he built this world of pure objects separated from reality. But you don't need to do that. That's what she said. And I agree with her. You don't need to do that. I think that's a mistake. That's
Well, that Husserl sounds a lot like Plato.
No, because he says this world of objects is not in a Platonic heaven. It's not the essence of Aristotle. It's something that the subject builds or something.
So it's just in the subject?
I'm not a Husserl expert.
It's wrong to say.
So where are those?
But I think he actually
just
is.
In my mind.
I think he actually is closer to Aristotle here.
He denies it
because he posits a teleology of reason in nature.
He denies it because he's human. He accepts Hume regarding experience. So it's not.
I don't know about that. I know that he.
So where are those essences? They're just in me.
Yeah, and then
where do they come from?
Of course,
that's not right because he thinks nature in itself has a teleology.
Yeah, but that transcendence of the subject is material only. So it's not, and that's Fegelin. That's a thing about which Fegelin thinks a lot. But then so in the end, he says no. I can recognize among the phenomena other subjects. And then it can be this world of objects is intersubjective. But each time says, well, 1 second, because I cannot know that you are a subject just through sense experience in a human way understood. I cannot. You know what I mean? If I bracket everything, I have to bracket the subjects too. They are not. So she says you cannot even say that there are other subjects if you accept that, unless you fall into Hegelian idealism, which he didn't want to. So she said no, there has to be in experience something. You cannot bracket everything. You have to accept that it is given to you that there are other human beings that have an intellect like yours, and then you can have empathy and all the stuff. But then if you accept that, then you have to accept that there is intelligibility in reality, and there is a source of that intelligibility that is not human beings, it's God. That's her. That's her. Yeah.
I didn't quite follow that. I mean, Heidegger has a very good evolution of Husserl here, I think, generally considered to have advanced with regard to intersubjectivity. Although the other thing here is like Husserl came very far at the end of his life and often is not given due credit, whether by Heidegger or by other scholars. So, like in Crisis, the last book, he comes with this notion of the life world and whatnot. He comes a lot closer to a kind of Heideggerian existential picture of intersubjectivity, which avoids these problems you're talking about, because it makes intersubjectivity fundamental.
He doesn't. The only way in which he conceives the transcendence is, as you say,
Who's
through
he?
Husserl, through matter. Like we all belong to the same nature, which is we come from there. But then these ideas, these phenomena are not material, and he knows that. So he has a problem there, and he has no way to say that there is a subject like me in him, because my experience is just sensible. That's the.
I mean, this isn't a problem for Heidegger.
Yeah, it's a problem because Heidegger is more Hegelian. That's the thing, I think. And Rosales thought to.
Yeah, maybe, but
Yeah.
that's not the issue here. I don't think. But anyway, what's the basis for tradition in Heidegger? It's the base. It has to do with the fundamental ontology of the human being, and it's that we are temporal fundamentally. Like that's what we most fundamentally are: is temporalization, retaining of the past, imprisoning, and projection of the future. So we're temporal. That's the basis of historicity, and we're intersubjective. That's the other basis of historicity. So the fact that we're always already temporalizing time, and we're doing so, and we're in a co-temporalizing kind of way with others, right? Like we're sort of constituting a world time and the reality, you know, the three of us being together right now.
What's the boundaries of intersubjectivity? Like where we participate in a kind of more or less intersubjective realm, right? We can talk philosophical concepts that are similar. We speak English. We kind of have a basic European experience of life, but there's got to be people outside of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But 1 second, because that's Heidegger's view.
Yeah.
So the classical view is very well. It has things in common, but it's different. So a little bit. So the point is, human beings are dependent. We are radically dependent on each other. So we are not like other animals that as soon as they are born, they are self-sufficient, like spiders, because we are not ruled by instincts and we don't have the.
So biologically.
Because we are
We
biologically
nurse
dependent.
for like a long time.
Yeah.
Your parents.
Yeah, so our reason exists in an animal body, and that animal body is very dependent in the beginning. Yeah, and so we need to be taken care of for a long time, and in that long time we acquire experience, we learn movements, we learn many, and then there is a moment when we are around 1.5 years when we finally learn to speak, and at that moment we grasp the first concept and we begin to grasp other concepts. There are no concepts before that. We need the adults to teach us that Aristotle says you need an intellect in act for the intellect potency of the baby to come to an act. You need also experience, you need, yeah.
I mean, so for Heidegger, this kind of like a genetic, biological, material story could never give rise to the thing we want to talk about.
because it's not just biological. That's the thing, it's not biological. Because
so we're dependent.
We are dependent, we are a spirit, but our intellect, Aristotle says, cannot grasp any spiritual reality directly. Our intellect is so that we always grasp intellectual reality, insensible reality. What is that? She's.
There's somebody here. I think my son's back. Yeah.
Your son's back?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think the Heideggerian point is more basic. It's that meaning is a public thing because it's mediated by language. Right?
Well, I think that has truth in it, but it's wrong.
Surely.
But it's wrong fundamentally. That's the problem with Heidegger, with Gadamer, sorry. Because Gadamer says every experience is mediated by language. That's not true. And you see that clearly in the small child.
Heidegger wouldn't say that.
Every experience is mediated by language. That's Gadamer's? You think that's
yeah. Every human experience is mediated by language.
Yeah.
And that's not true. You see that very clearly in the small child.
Heidegger would say something similar, but he'd say discourse, reda, an ontological thing.
Cognition, maybe?
Language, no,
but before language.
But languages are ontic. So you could have a human being without language. You couldn't have a human being without discourse or without intersubjectivity. you could have a human who was raised on like an island by wolves, and like there's no human language to learn, so they never have language.
Well, we have that
Are they
experience.
human then?
We have that
But they
experience.
still have discourse. They still have intersubjectivity.
No, but it's not what I mean. It's not what I mean at all, because we have the experience of the wolf children,
Yeah.
and
Casper Hauser and
they were raised by their families who didn't. They just fed them. They didn't talk to them. So those kids it was a French girl and a U.S. Boy. They were rescued when they were like 8 years old, and they were unable to learn to speak. But they were able to master like pets words, but as like pets. They were unable to understand their meaning. That time was past for them. They couldn't do that. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right. They can't.
So-
Once you get to a certain
Yeah.
age, it's like.
And
You
so
either
they,
get it or you
I
don't.
would say their intellect remained in potency. It was not actualized. But in the small kid that grows normally, and the best experience we have of this is Helen Keller. In the small kid that grows normally, and that happened in Helen Keller when she was 6 years and a half because of her problem. There is a grasp that is previous to language. That's the point. There is a grasp of being that presupposed by language.
Sure.
But that couldn't happen without language. So in this sense, the kid needs to associate things in order to grasp the essence. And the way to do that is through the label of words. But the grasp is not the label. You know what I mean? The grasp is something deeper. But the kid needs the adults to do that. And then, not only that, for example, Helen Keller, the day in which she realized that water was water, the thing flowing on her hand was that sign. So that sign meant that thing flowing, better say. She learned like 20 words, but when she came back to the house, she stepped on a doll that she had broken that morning, and she realized that she had done wrong for the first time in her life, and she cried. So she entered into a moral dimension in which she was not before. You know what I mean? Like she said, when I was sitting on the living room, and then my teacher, who was Anne Sullivan, with signs indicated they were going to go outside. And then she said, I felt joy. If you can call joy that feeling without name. And then she goes out. But before that, she had broken this doll. Okay, but they gave her a doll, and she was angry. She threw it to the ground and broke it. So there she had feelings. But like an animal. She had not grasped anything intelligible. So when she went to the fountain and she had her hand under the water, and Anne Sullivan was riding water on the other hand, suddenly she pressed her hand because she had understood for the first time. And once she understands, in the way to the house, she asked for the name of other 6 things. And she got she touched a thing and gave her hand to receive the word. And then when she came, she stepped on the pieces of the doll and she cried. Okay, she had never felt remorse. That's what I mean. And that day, for the first time, she gave a kiss to her teacher and a kiss to her mother too.
So connect the dots here for me.
So what happens is she
You're
enters.
talking about her emergence into a space of meaning.
Yeah.
So and morality. But so from there on, she needed, like every kid needs, and you know that. Every kid needs the parents to tell him, well, why did you do that? Would you like that I do that to you?
So this is the dependence.
And not only that, it's a tradition. You know what I mean? In the tradition, the parents are teaching the child to acknowledge what is good. And it's not something, I mean, if the parents are good parents, it's not something artificial, it's something that is real.
They need that immediate experience to connect them to more distant
Yeah, and then
Well, and this isn't
Conceptual
just
ideas.
morality. This is ontology as well. Because to know
Yeah, of
what
course.
something is, you must know what the good thing.
yeah, no, yeah,
is.
like she couldn't know water.
Yeah.
I mean, so she at that moment so there is a great child psychologist whose name is William Stern. He's Wilhelm Stern. He was German, but he changed his name because he was Jewish German. He was Protestant, but he was. So after the Nazi movement, he changed to William Stern. But this guy has a psychology of early childhood. That book is excellent. And there he says, well, when she learned water and then she asked for the names of everything, she had her first general discovery, which is that everything has a name. That's what Aristotle and Aquinas call being.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds just like
So,
Heidegger. Heidegger
it's-
would say, the way you're describing it, I don't know the case at all, so I'm taking your word for it, but, for the first time, she experiences something as something. And suddenly that opens her up to the fact that beings are as being
Yeah, and-
all the time. And so all of a sudden she's curious about,
But
what
not
is this, what is
not
that?
as something. So it's aliquid. It's all aliquid. That's a. So it's something concrete with an essence. Something concrete with an essence. It's not.
And this is something that's gained through, because we're dependent, it's something that's gained through
The adults,
instruction
yeah.
through adults.
Not instruction exactly.
Well, it'd be
Yeah,
some
like-
kind of
like induction, let's say something like that.
induction,
Yeah.
and
Socialization.
sort of social, some
Not only it's not socialization. It's like
through.
they.
What do you call it then?
The adult. I call it induction. I think it's better. So the adult helps you to grasp by yourself. You know what I mean? Because he cannot give you the grasp.
Right.
He just leads you to direct your.
They play like the role of, the person with the AI who adjusts the weights. Like, the kid says, is that a cup? Like, yeah, it is. Is this a cup? No, it's not. Like, you
Right.
you give them feedback. And
Yeah, but it's not only
We only
feedback.
know things as they are because somebody told us, right? Somebody told us all, collective, the three of us, that that's a cup.
Yeah,
That's-
but that's just the word. It's
Right.
not. It's not. So when they gave us the word, we grasped the essence,
right.
which
Right.
is beyond
So
the
we can
word.
recognize this is a cup, and then we can go somewhere else and
Yeah,
notice that that's a cup, or
yeah, but it's beyond the word. That's what I
Right.
try to say. That's why, like my girl when she was like 2 years old, I always spoke to her in Spanish, and my wife always spoke to her in English. And she would say something to her mom in English, and then if I asked, "Well, Abuelita," she would repeat it to me in Spanish. Because it's not a matter of words, it's something that she understands that it's beyond the
Right.
words. Yeah.
correct? Yeah. So there's the word is a sign of
Exactly.
something more fundamental,
Yeah,
more conceptual,
which is
and
necessary
essential.
because the little person cannot associate, cannot have perfect experience without the word.
Right, and that's what allows for commensurability, right? Because
Yeah, exactly.
we can translate
Exactly.
Latin into English because it's the words are just signs of underlying
Yeah, exactly. That's my point.
nature of things.
Yeah, and then the same
But
thing.
this is what I was saying earlier. There are two bases for commensurability. One is reality, period. We're all part of the same world.
Yeah, but
And that could be a basis for commensurability.
Yeah, but I
Like
wanna-
let me finish with
Yeah,
aliens
sorry.
and such.
Yeah.
The other basis is shared physiology. Yeah, we have a lot of common experience because we are built similarly. We have similar visual systems, auditory systems, etc. Right? So we have a fundamentally similar embodied experience of the world. And the world itself is the same, even deeper than that. Those are two bases for commensurability, sure.
sorry. Yeah, no, sorry for interrupting you. Yeah.
That's all right.
But
No worries.
what I wanted was
But is
because
it
reality,
biology?
also
I
I-
heard, yeah.
reality is too universal. That's why I wanted to go to the concrete thing.
But if you limit it to biology, then
No, I don't limit it to us.
then that would mean that if there are aliens and
Yeah.
we try to talk about, well,
There is no.
we use these cups
Then
for
you
drinking.
then you have to go back to the first ground that you're in the same reality. But yeah, like
Yeah.
what is it? Arrival or whatever that movie is, where it's like, oh,
Right.
the aliens have a radically alien language system.
Right.
Like, you know, okay, it's radically different. How is it even possible to theoretically bridge these radically different languages because they're part of the same underlying reality?
Yeah, well, what I want is go to the concrete.
Yeah,
To
but
the
I
concrete
have to
thing.
use the bathroom.
Let's
Speaking of
pause.
the concrete.
Yeah.
Pause.
In fact,
When are we finishing?
yeah,
though?
we should probably.
I think that tradition is a kind of transmission of human experience, both in theoretical matters and in practical matters, that is possible because, well, human beings are dependent on each other. We cannot even start to understand without others, but also because we all are like directed to a goal, I think, and we are immersed in a reality that is common, and then the teachers can help us to develop that to which we are directed in tradition, because as Aristotle says, you cannot act virtuously if you don't have a mentor who tells you what actions are virtuous and tells you how to do those actions. And only when you do those actions then you understand fully why acting virtuously is so good. You know what I mean? So there is an epistemological problem in tradition, in the moral aspect in that way. But that's possible because, as we were saying, there is also a moral, I think, a moral reality that is beyond what the teacher is teaching. I mean, so a reality that he's teaching, better say. He teaches this in a particular way, but there is a reality. Yeah, that's my take on the subject. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this was a good start to a conversation we can continue to have. From my kind of Heideggerian perspective, you know, human history, is made by individuals, right? Because we are the ones that actually first personally exist and have an understanding of being and so on. But it's made collectively. It's made through intersubjective negotiation and decision and consensus and so on. And that's how I view history in general, and tradition perhaps more particularly, is the social negotiation and transmission of meaning.
Yeah.
And, well, yeah, maybe I just leave it at that.
Yeah, I take from both of those. Yeah, I see it as it's something dynamic. I see tradition as something very dynamic. It's always being fed by new information and new contact. It is a thing. I think tradition is a definable thing. Like, I think it makes sense to say, yeah, I'm part of a European tradition because I grew up in Boston and New York, and I spoke English, and I was educated in this way and that way, and it's distinct from having, and I grew up, you know, in the 80s and 90s, and so that is distinct from saying, like, oh, if I'd grown up in China 2,000 years ago. Like, I think we can say, yeah, those are two distinct traditions, two distinct ways of understanding and appropriating reality, and they both may have access, give us access to, or help us understand something that's beyond them. But I do think that they are two different sort of conduits by which that might happen. But at the same time, I see tradition as something also very fluid and dynamic, that's always receiving influxes from new sources. So it's also at the same time not entirely distinct and distinguishable. Like, it's got to have some kind of border, but I'm not always sure where that big border begins and ends, you know.
Well, maybe one thing to think about for next time would be, in what sense is a tradition something living? Because living things are dynamic.
I think it's got to be alive.
Yeah.
I think a tradition is a living
Yeah.
thing. Otherwise, it's
But there is
it
another.
has no receptivity. There's no
And
receiver of it.
And then there's also, well,
Yeah.
there's stuff to say about like where Heidegger took this in his middle period, where he starts to, this is, you know, the notorious term folk for people becomes very significant in his thought and with his politics. And there are issues there because we get to like, you know, okay, who is a tradition of, or, you know, a tradition of whom? Who does it belong to? A people. Okay, what's a people? And then we have to talk about like what a people is and so on. But anyway, I just
Yeah,
well,
that's a big question.
there's-
So the subject
yeah,
of
there's
tradition.
a lot.
But I think there is another element that we are leaving outside, and maybe we can consider at some point. I think that Plato is right in one point, which is that this whole movement of history and tradition is in between the pole of the changeable and the eternal.
Right.
The-
I think the reason I have to say it's living
Yeah.
is it's got to be received from a living
No, yeah, and I agree with
person,
that.
right? It's you. I get tradition from a parent, a
Yeah.
teacher,
Yeah.
a peer. You know, it's received through vocalization. Through I call it immediacy. The immediate. There's the
Yeah.
immediate reception. It may give us that. I mean, I learned Plato through my professor. I learned language through a parent, which is giving you access to English, which goes back thousands of years. I learned German, which goes back hundreds, whatever. You know, but it's got to be received from. There's no other human creatures around to teach me. Then I have no tradition. I'm just an animal. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
you know, like a-
Exactly, like we
like-
were saying.
yeah, yeah.
And some kind of commitment is presupposed as well, I think, to keep it, to preserve it. If there isn't, I mean, this is what we
Right.
talk about, like,
Those humans have to be people who are engaged in some kind of
yeah.
intellectual process.
Well, and like the
Right.
whole, like the idea of if traditions are living things, then we're going to talk
Right.
about the lifespan of a tradition, and then we need to talk about the death of a tradition.
Right.
You know, how do traditions die? What does that look